Jake Morrison walked through the glass corridors of the Galactic Academic Institute, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The building stretched high above him, its crystal walls showing the purple sky of Zentara Prime through transparent panels. Strange plants with silver leaves grew in perfect rows along the walkways, and the air smelled like vanilla and copper. He checked his watch and picked up his pace. His first xenobiology class started in 5 minutes, and he did not want to be late on his first day. The other human exchange students, Katie Bell and Carlos Martinez, were probably already there. They had arrived on Zentara Prime 3 days ago as part of the first human exchange program with the galactic community. Jake pushed open the classroom door and found Katie and Carlos sitting in the back row. The room was much larger than he expected, with curved seating that wrapped around a central platform. 22 alien students filled the other seats, representing species he had only seen in textbooks. A tall, graceful being with blue skin and 4 arms stood at the front of the room. Her eyes were large and golden, and she wore flowing robes that seemed to change color as she moved. This had to be Professor Vexithera, their xenobiology instructor. "Welcome, students," Professor Vexithera said, her voice musical and clear. "I see our human exchange students have joined us today. Please take your seats anywhere you feel comfortable." Jake slid into the seat next to Katie. She was staring at a student 3 rows down who looked like a walking crystal formation, being caught light from the room's panels and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. "That's a Zephyrian," Carlos whispered, leaning over from Katie's other side. "I read about them on the ship. They're made of living crystal." Professor Vexithera activated a holographic display above the central platform. A spinning model of a planet appeared, covered in blue oceans and green continents. "Today we begin our study of planetary classification systems. This knowledge forms the foundation of understanding how life develops across the galaxy." The hologram changed, showing 5 different types of planets in a row. Each one glowed with a different color. "The standard classification system divides worlds into 5 categories," the professor continued. "Class 1 worlds are paradise planets. Perfect temperature, stable weather, no dangerous animals or natural disasters. Very few species are lucky enough to evolve on such worlds." The first planet in the display glowed soft green. Jake could see cities spread across its surface like gardens, with no visible signs of industry or conflict. Class 2 worlds are garden planets. These have mild seasons, gentle weather patterns, and peaceful ecosystems. Most of our advanced civilizations developed on garden worlds. The second planet showed rolling hills and calm seas under a gentle sun. A student near the front raised what looked like a tentacle. "Professor, isn't Zentara Prime a Class 2 world?" "Correct, Wispel. Our world represents an ideal Class 2 environment." Professor Vexithera smiled, her golden eyes brightening. "Class 3 worlds are standard planets. They have more varied climates and some challenging weather, but remain quite livable for most species." The third planet showed mountains and deserts, alongside forests and lakes. It looked more varied than the others, but still peaceful. Class 4 worlds are harsh planets. These have extreme temperatures, difficult weather patterns, or dangerous geological activity. Few species achieve spaceflight from Class 4 worlds due to the challenges of survival. The fourth planet looked rough and unwelcoming. Jake could see massive storms swirling across its surface, and the land looked cracked and dry in some places, frozen in others. Finally, we have Class 5 worlds, also known as Deathworlds. These are purely theoretical constructs used in our models. Professor Vexithera's voice took on an academic tone. "No intelligent life could possibly evolve on a death world. The conditions are too extreme, too hostile. They exist only in computer simulations to help us understand the absolute limits of planetary habitability." The fifth planet appeared as a swirling mass of storms, earthquakes, and chaos. Jake stared at it and felt a strange tickle in the back of his mind. Something about it looked familiar. Around the room, alien students nodded and took notes. A plant-like being with leaves for hair rustled softly as she wrote. The crystal student from earlier chimed quietly, creating musical notes that seemed to be her way of taking notes. Professor Vexithera continued her lecture, explaining how planetary conditions shaped the evolution of different species. She talked about atmospheric composition, gravity levels, and temperature ranges. Most of the alien students came from worlds very similar to Zentara Prime, peaceful, stable, and safe. Jake found himself thinking about home. He remembered the tornado that had torn through his hometown in Kansas when he was 12. His family had hidden in the basement for 3 hours while the wind howled above them. When they came out, half the town was gone. But everyone just started rebuilding the next day. His mom had made jokes about it, saying Kansas wouldn't be Kansas without a little excitement from the weather. He thought about Katie's stories of growing up in California, where earthquakes were so common that people barely mentioned them unless they were really big ones. And Carlos had lived through 3 hurricanes in Florida before he turned 18. Now, Professor Vexithera said, "Let me show you the classification data for each of your homeworlds. This will help you understand how your planetary environment shaped your species' development." She began pulling up data for different worlds. The Zephyrian homeworld appeared first, a perfect crystal paradise with stable geology and no weather at all. Then came the Verdani world, covered in peaceful forests that never experienced storms or fires. Jake raised his hand. The gesture felt strange in the quiet academic atmosphere, but Professor Vexithera noticed him immediately. "Yes, Jake Morrison? You have a question?" "Professor, what classification would Earth receive under this system?" The question seemed innocent. Enough. Jake was genuinely curious where his homeworld fit in the galactic classification system. Around him, the alien students turned to look at the humans with mild interest. They probably expected Earth to be a Class 2 or Class 3 world, since humans had achieved spaceflight and were now part of the galactic community. Professor Vexthera smiled and activated her datapad. "An excellent question. Let me pull up Earth's environmental data." She tapped her screen several times and Jake could see her expression change. The confident smile faded. Her golden eyes grew wider. She tapped the screen again, then frowned at the display. "I'm sorry. There seems to be some error in the data," she said, her musical voice now uncertain. "Let me recalibrate the sensors." Katie and Carlos exchanged glances. They could see Professor Vexithera's growing confusion as she worked with her datapad. Around the room, alien students began to whisper among themselves, creating a soft symphony of chirps, chimes, and rustling sounds. Professor Vexithera looked up from her datapad, her blue face now a slightly paler shade. "Students, I'm getting some very unusual readings for the human homeworld. The data seems to indicate conditions that are far more extreme than I expected." She activated the holographic display again, and slowly, Earth appeared above the central platform. But this wasn't the peaceful blue marble that humans were used to seeing in their own textbooks. This was Earth as seen through the eyes of the galactic classification system. Massive hurricane systems swirled across the oceans. The land masses showed active earthquake zones, volcanic regions, and areas marked in red for extreme temperature variations. The polar ice caps looked like frozen wastelands, while the equatorial regions glowed with heat indicators that made several alien students gasp. "According to this data," Professor Vexithera said slowly, "your homeworld has gravity 1.3 times galactic standard, atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to most species, and weather systems with wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour." The crystal student, Crystalleth, made a sound like breaking glass. The plant student's leaves began to wither at the edges. Professor Vexithera continued reading from her datapad, her voice growing quieter with each detail. "Geological instability with frequent seismic events, extreme temperature variations across seasons, and 71% of the surface covered in a corrosive liquid that dissolves most known materials." Jake looked at Katie and Carlos. They both looked confused but not particularly concerned. This was just Earth, after all, the planet they had grown up on, the world they called home. Professor Vexithera's voice became barely audible as she spoke the final classification. "According to all standard metrics, the human homeworld registers as a Class 5 death world." The classroom fell completely silent. The silence in the classroom stretched for what felt like forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat and the soft humming of the building's air system. Around the room, 22 alien faces stared at the holographic image of Earth floating above the central platform. Professor Vex Thara looked at her datapad again, tapping the screen with 2 of her 4 hands. Her golden eyes darted between the device and the 3 human students sitting in the back row. "There must be some mistake," she said, her musical voice now shaky. "The sensors must be malfunctioning. Let me run the analysis again." Jake watched as she worked with the controls. Numbers and charts appeared in the air next to Earth's image. He could see atmospheric readings, temperature charts, and geological data streaming past in alien symbols he couldn't read. "The oxygen levels alone," Professor Vexithera muttered, speaking more to herself than to the class. 21% oxygen by volume. That's enough to cause oxygen poisoning in most species within hours. A student near the front made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Jake recognized her as Crystalleth, the Zephyrian made of living crystal. Her body was flashing different colors rapidly, which Jake guessed meant she was upset. "Professor?" Crystalleth said, her voice like music played on glass instruments. "Surely there's an error. How could intelligent life evolve in such conditions?" Professor Vexithera looked up from her datapad. Her blue skin had turned an even paler shade, almost white. "The data has been verified 3 times. These readings are accurate." She pointed at the holographic Earth with one of her long fingers. "The atmospheric pressure alone is 1.3 times what most of us consider normal. The temperature variations range from -40 degrees to +50 degrees Celsius across different regions and seasons." Wispel, the gas-based Nethori student, began to pulse with worried colors. His semi-solid form rippled like disturbed water. "But Professor, those temperature swings would kill most forms of life. How do the humans survive such extremes?" All eyes turned to Jake, Katie, and Carlos. Jake felt suddenly self-conscious under the stares of so many alien beings. He had never thought of Earth as particularly dangerous. It was just home. "Well," Jake said slowly, "we have clothes for different weather, and heating and air conditioning in our buildings." The alien students exchanged glances that Jake couldn't interpret. He got the feeling he had somehow made things worse. Professor Vexithera consulted her datapad again. "The geological data shows frequent seismic activity. Your planet experiences thousands of earthquakes every year, many of them strong enough to destroy cities." Carlos shrugged. "Yeah, earthquakes happen. You just get used to them. Most of the time they're not that bad." "Not that bad?" Professor Vexithera's voice rose in pitch. "According to this data, your planet regularly experiences seismic events that would level our cities and kill millions of our people." "Well, we build our buildings to handle earthquakes," Katie said, trying to be helpful. "It's just part of the building codes where I come from in California." A student who looked like a walking tree with bark-like skin and leaves growing from her head spoke up in a voice like rustling branches. "Building codes? You mean you plan for these disasters?" "Sure," Katie said, "we have to. Otherwise the buildings would fall down when the ground shakes." Blumara, the plant-like Verdani student, rustled her leaves nervously. "On my world, the ground never shakes. The idea of the Earth itself moving is terrifying." Professor Vexthara was scrolling through more data on her device. "The weather patterns show storm systems with wind speeds over 300 kilometers per hour. These typhoons and hurricanes occur regularly across your planet's surface." "Oh yeah, hurricane season," Carlos said with a smile. "I grew up in Florida. You just board up the windows and wait it out. My family has a whole routine for hurricane prep." The alien student stared at him in horror. Wispahel's gaseous form began to swirl faster, which Jake was beginning to recognize as a sign of distress. "You wait them out?" Wispahel asked. "You remain on the planet's surface while these massive storms occur?" "Where else would we go?" Carlos asked, genuinely confused by the question. Professor Vexithera set down her datapad and looked directly at the 3 humans. "Students, I need you to understand what you're telling us. You're describing survival strategies for conditions that would exterminate most known forms of life." She activated the holographic display again, showing a comparison between Earth and Zentara Prime. The differences were striking. Zentara Prime looked calm and stable, with gentle weather patterns and no visible geological activity. Earth looked like a planet at war with itself. Your world experiences what we would call catastrophic weather events on a regular basis. The liquid covering most of your planet's surface would dissolve the bodies of at least 12 species in this room. Crystalleth chimed in distress. The corrosive properties of dihydrogen monoxide are well documented. How do you survive contact with such a dangerous substance? Katie looked confused. Dihydrogen monoxide? You mean water? Water. Blumara's leaves curled up at the edges. You have a name for it? You interact with it regularly? We drink it, Jake said, and swim in it for fun. The classroom erupted in sounds of shock and dismay. Crystalleth flashed so many colors that she looked like a disco ball. Wispel's form became so agitated that he started to spread toward the ceiling. Several students in the middle rows were making high-pitched sounds that Jake assumed were their version of screaming. Professor Vexithera held up all four of her hands for silence. Students, please, let's maintain academic composure. The room gradually quieted, but Jake could see that many of the alien students were still visibly shaken. Some had moved their seats farther away from the humans. Let me review more of this. Data, Professor Vexithera said, though her hands were shaking as she operated her datapad. Your planet shows evidence of massive volcanic activity. Molten rock regularly breaks through the surface, creating new land masses and destroying existing ones. Volcanoes are pretty cool, Jake said. I visited Yellowstone National Park when I was a kid. There are geysers that shoot hot water hundreds of feet into the air. You visit these locations? For recreation? Professor Vexithera's voice cracked. Sure, lots of people do. It's beautiful there. Professor Vexithera sat down heavily. In her chair behind the central platform, she stared at the holographic Earth for a long moment, then looked at her class full of disturbed alien students, then back at the three humans who were sitting calmly, as if nothing unusual had been discussed. According to every metric we use to classify planetary habitability, she said slowly, your homeworld is not just hostile to life. It should be completely uninhabitable by any intelligent species. She paused, studying the data one more time. The gravitational field is too strong. The atmospheric composition is toxic. The weather patterns are catastrophic. The geological activity is constant and destructive. The surface liquid is corrosive. The temperature variations are lethal. Professor Vexithara looked up at Jake, Katie, and Carlos with something approaching awe in her golden eyes. Yet somehow, not only did intelligent life evolve on your Deathworld, but you achieved space flight and joined the galactic community. You're sitting here calm and healthy, describing conditions that would kill most of us within hours. She turned to address the entire class, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Students, we are witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. We are meeting the survivors of a Class 5 Deathworld. This changes everything we thought we knew about the limits of life in the universe. The alien students turned to stare at the humans with new expressions. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Wonder, respect, and maybe just a little bit of admiration for the three beings who had somehow learned to call hell their home. When Jake walked into the xenobiology classroom the following week, he was surprised to find it packed with students. The usual 22 alien students were there, but they had been joined by at least 15 others. Some were standing along the walls because there weren't enough seats. Katie and Carlos were already sitting in their usual spots in the back row. Jake squeezed past a group of curious alien beings and sat down next to them. Did you guys hear about this? Katie whispered, gesturing toward the crowded room. Apparently word got out about last week's class. Carlos nodded toward the front of the room. Look who else is here. Jake looked and saw several adult aliens wearing the formal robes that marked them as professors. They were sitting in the front row talking quietly with Professor Vexithera. One of them had 8 eyes arranged around his head like a crown. Another looked like a walking collection of metal tubes and wires. Professor Vexithera called for attention and the room gradually quieted. Students, as you can see, we have some guests today. Word of our discussion about human planetary origins has spread throughout the Institute. Several of my colleagues have asked permission to observe today's class. She gestured toward the three humans. I've asked our human students to share more details about daily life on their homeworld. I believe this will help us better understand how intelligent life can adapt to extreme planetary conditions. Jake felt nervous with so many eyes focused on him and his friends. Some of the alien students from other classes were staring at them, like they were exotic animals in a zoo. A student Jake didn't recognize raised what looked like a tentacle with an eye on the end. "Is it true that your planet tries to kill you regularly?" Carlos laughed. "Well, I wouldn't put it that way. Earth can be dangerous, but it's not like it's trying to hurt us on purpose. But you do face regular threats to your survival?" The student pressed. "I guess so," Carlos said. "I mean, I grew up in Florida, so hurricanes were pretty normal. My family would start getting ready when hurricane season started every year." Professor Vexithara activated her holographic display. "Carlos, could you describe what preparation for these storms involves?" Carlos thought for a moment. "Well, we'd buy extra food and water in case the power went out. We'd board up the windows with plywood to protect the glass from flying debris. We'd charge all our electronic devices and fill the bathtub with water." The alien students were taking notes frantically. Jake could hear the scratching of writing implements and the soft chiming sounds that some species used for recording information. "How long do these storms last?" asked Blumara, the plant-like student. "Depends on the hurricane. Could be a few hours, could be a whole day. Hurricane Andrew lasted about 14 hours when it hit us." "And you remained in your dwelling during this entire period?" Professor Vexthera asked. "Yeah, you have to stay inside. The winds can pick up cars and throw them around. Going outside during a hurricane is basically suicide." Crystalleth flashed bright red. "Your planet's weather systems are powerful enough to move vehicles?" "Oh yeah," Carlos said casually. "Hurricane winds can reach 300 kilometers per hour. They can pick up pretty much anything that isn't nailed down." One of the visiting professors, the one with 8 eyes, leaned forward. "And your family survived multiple encounters with these phenomena?" "Sure. We lived through 3 big ones before. I graduated high school. You just learn to prepare for them." Jake decided to add his own experience. "Where I come from in Kansas, we get tornadoes instead of hurricanes. Those are smaller but more focused." "Tornadoes." Wispel's gaseous form swirled nervously. "They're like spinning columns of air that touch down from storm clouds. The wind spins around in a circle, creating a funnel that can destroy everything in its path." Jake pulled out his phone and showed a video he had taken of a tornado from his back porch when he was 16. The alien students watched in horrified fascination as the dark funnel moved across the landscape, tearing up trees and farm buildings. "You recorded this yourself?" asked one of the visiting professors. "Yeah, from our back porch. This one was about 2 kilometers away, so it was safe to watch." "Safe?" Crystalleth's voice went up several octaves. "You considered being 2 kilometers away from that destruction to be safe?" "Well, yeah. As long as it's not coming toward you, tornadoes are actually pretty cool to watch." Professor Vexithera was typing rapidly on her datapad. "Jake, how often do these tornadoes occur in your region?" "Kansas gets about 100 tornadoes every year. Spring is tornado season. Schools have tornado drills just like fire drills." The room buzzed with shocked whispers. Jake heard one student say something that sounded like preparatory training for planetary combat scenarios. Katie decided it was her turn to share. "California has different problems. We get earthquakes and wildfires." "Wildfires?" Blumara rustled her leaves anxiously. "Yeah, especially in the summer when everything gets dry. The fires can spread really fast and burn thousands of acres." Katie showed pictures on her phone of the wildfire that had threatened her college campus 2 years earlier. The images showed walls of flame stretching across hillsides and orange skies filled with smoke. "This fire came within 5 kilometers of our campus," Katie explained. "We had to evacuate for 3 days until the fire department got it under control." "Your planet spontaneously combusts?" asked a student Jake hadn't seen before. "Not exactly. Usually it's caused by lightning strikes or power lines falling down. Sometimes people start them by accident." And the earthquakes you mentioned? Professor Vexithara prompted. Oh, those happen all the time, and most of them are so small you barely notice. But we had a pretty big one during my junior year of college. Katie described waking up at 3 in the morning to her dorm room shaking violently. She talked about how the building swayed back and forth, how books fell off shelves, and how car alarms went off all across the city. The shaking lasted about 45 seconds, she said. It was a 6.1 magnitude quake. Not huge, but big enough to crack some buildings and break water pipes. And you remained on the planet after this experience? Asked the professor with the metal tube body. Where else would I go? Katie asked, genuinely puzzled. It was just an earthquake. They happen. Jake noticed that many of the alien students had moved their seats even farther away from the humans. Some looked like they wanted to leave the room entirely. Let me make sure I understand, Professor Vexithara said slowly. You three have personally experienced planetary weather systems capable of destroying cities, geological events that can collapse buildings, and fires that consume entire regions. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty dramatic, Jake said. But it's really not that bad. Humans have been dealing with this stuff for thousands of years. How? Kristaleth asked. How is your species still alive? Carlos shrugged. We adapt, we build stronger buildings, we create early warning systems, we help each other out when bad things happen. Help each other? Wispel asked. Sure. After Hurricane Andrew, people came from all over the country to help rebuild. Volunteers showed up with food, water, and construction supplies. Complete strangers helping complete strangers. Jake nodded. Same thing happens after tornadoes. The whole community comes together to clean up and rebuild. And after earthquakes, Katie added, people organize search and rescue teams to look for survivors in collapsed buildings. The alien students were staring at them with expressions Jake couldn't read. One of the visiting professors was taking notes so fast that his writing implement was smoking. Professor Vexthera looked around the room at her colleagues and students. What we're hearing, students, is not just about survival on a death world. We're learning about a species that has turned constant mortal danger into a foundation for cooperation and community building. She turned back to the humans. Your planet doesn't just threaten your lives regularly. It has taught your entire species to help each other survive impossible conditions. Jake, Katie, and Carlos exchanged glances. They had never thought about it that way before. But Professor Vexithera was right. Humans did tend to come together during disasters. I suppose that's true, Jake said. When things get really bad, people usually step up to help. The eight-eyed professor spoke for the first time. Fascinating. Your death world didn't just fail to kill you. It created a species with advanced cooperation instincts as a survival mechanism. Professor Vexithara nodded. Students, I believe we need to completely revise our understanding of how extreme environments affect intelligent life development. She looked at the three humans with something approaching reverence. You're not just survivors. You're the ultimate proof that life finds a way to thrive anywhere. By the third week, the xenobiology classroom had been moved to the largest lecture hall in the Galactic Academic Institute. Jake counted at least 60 alien beings in the audience as he walked down the steps to his usual seat. Students from every department seemed to be there, along with professors he had never seen before. At the front of the hall, Professor Vexithara was setting up multiple holographic displays. Next to her stood 3 other professors that Jake recognized from previous classes. There was Dr. Quintess from the psychology department, whose head looked like a flower with petals that changed color based on her emotions. Professor Helixarn from evolutionary biology resembled a giant spiral shell with arms and legs. Most impressive was Elder Serenthal, the dean of the institute, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and had skin that looked like polished stone. This is getting crazy, Katie whispered as they sat down. I feel like we're in a zoo. Carlos nodded toward a group of students in the front row who were holding recording devices. I think some of them are making documentaries about us. Elder Serenthal stepped forward, and the hall fell silent immediately. His voice was deep and rumbled like distant thunder. Students and colleagues, today we continue our unprecedented study of Deathworld adaptation. Our human guests have agreed to share more details about their remarkable civilization. He gestured toward Jake, Katie, and Carlos. What we have learned so far challenges every assumption we have made about the limits of intelligent life. Today we hope to understand not just how humans survive their hostile world, but how they have built a thriving society despite constant mortal danger. Professor Vexthara activated the first holographic display, showing images of human cities. Let's begin with your urban centers. These structures are built to withstand the natural disasters you've described? Jake looked at the images of New York, Tokyo, and Los Angeles floating in the air above the hall. Yeah, every building has to meet safety codes for whatever disasters are common in that area. Safety codes? Dr. Quintess asked, her petal-like head shifting to curious yellow colors. Rules about how strong buildings have to be, Carlos explained. In Florida, everything has to be built to survive hurricane winds. In California, buildings have to be designed so they won't fall down during earthquakes. And in Japan, Katie added, they build skyscrapers that can sway back and forth during earthquakes without breaking. The alien audience murmured among themselves. Jake heard phrases like structural adaptation and defensive architecture being whispered in various alien languages. Professor Helixarn moved closer to the holographic display. These urban centers house millions of your species simultaneously? Yeah, Jake said. New York has about 8 million people, Tokyo has even more. You concentrate your population in areas most vulnerable to your planet's destructive forces? Elder Serenthal asked. Well, cities are usually built where they are for good reasons, Carlos said. Near rivers for water and transportation or near harbors for trade. The fact that these places might be dangerous is just something we deal with. Katie pulled out her phone and showed a video of the Golden Gate Bridge swaying in high winds. This bridge was built to handle earthquakes and strong winds. It's designed to move with the forces instead of fighting them. The alien students watched in fascination as the massive structure bent and swayed but remained intact. Your engineering philosophy is based on adaptation rather than resistance, Professor Helixarn observed. Fascinating. Dr. Quintess stepped forward, her petals now bright orange with curiosity. I'm interested in the psychological aspects of your civilization. How do your people maintain mental stability while living under constant threat? Jake thought about the question. I don't think we really think about it as constant threat. It's just normal life. But surely the stress of potential disaster affects your behavior? Dr. Quintess pressed. Maybe, Katie said. But we have ways of dealing with it. We have emergency plans, insurance, community support systems. Community support systems? Elder Serenthal asked. Carlos smiled. Like after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, the whole country sent help. Money, food, volunteers, emergency workers. It was one of the biggest disaster response efforts in our history. Volunteers? Kristaleth chimed from somewhere in the middle of the hall. Yeah, people who help without being paid, Jake explained. After disasters, thousands of people show up to help with cleanup and rebuilding. Jake pulled up news footage on his phone showing volunteers after various disasters. Images of people sandbagging during floods, distributing food after earthquakes, and rebuilding homes after tornadoes. These individuals receive no compensation for this dangerous work? Professor Helixarn asked. Nope, they just want to help, Carlos said. My uncle drove from Texas to Louisiana after Katrina just to help people he'd never met. The hall erupted in excited chatter. Dr. Quintess's petals were now cycling through multiple colors rapidly, which Jake had learned meant she was extremely interested. This is unprecedented, she announced to the hall. We're observing altruistic behavior that has been reinforced by environmental pressure. Your Deathworld has literally evolved you to be helpful to each other. Elder Serenthal raised one massive stone hand for silence. Tell us about your medical practices. How do you treat injuries from these constant disasters? We have emergency rooms in hospitals, Katie said. Doctors and nurses who specialize in trauma medicine. Trauma medicine? Professor Vexthara asked. Yeah, treating people who've been badly hurt, Jake explained. Like if someone gets crushed in an earthquake or cut by flying debris in a tornado. He showed pictures of emergency rooms and ambulances. We have paramedics who go into dangerous situations to rescue injured people. Sometimes they risk their own lives to save others. They voluntarily enter disaster zones? Dr. Quintess asked, her petals now flashing bright red with amazement. It's their job, Carlos said. But yeah, they choose to do it. Firefighters run into burning buildings. Coast Guard pilots fly helicopters into hurricanes to rescue people. Jake found a video of a Coast Guard rescue during a hurricane. The alien, audience watched in stunned silence as humans in helicopters lowered themselves on ropes into massive storm waves to save people from sinking boats. Your species regularly risks death to save other members of your species, Elder Serenthal said, slowly. Even individuals you don't know personally. Well, yeah, Katie said. That's what people do. Professor Helixarn was taking notes rapidly. The evolutionary implications are staggering. Your hostile environment has selected for individuals who prioritize group survival over personal safety. I have a question about your recreational activities, Dr. Quintess said. Her petals had shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, a deep purple that seemed to glow. Sure, Jake said. Do you engage in dangerous activities voluntarily, for enjoyment? Jake, Katie, and Carlos looked at each other. This was going to be interesting. What do you mean? Carlos asked. Activities that risk injury or death but which you choose to do anyway. Oh, Katie said. Like sports? She showed videos on her phone of football, hockey, and martial arts. The alien audience watched humans deliberately colliding with each other at high speeds, fighting with padded weapons and engaging in what could only be described as controlled combat. You simulate warfare for entertainment? Wispel asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. Not warfare exactly, Jake said. Competition, testing yourself against other people. I played football in high school, Carlos added. It's about strategy, teamwork, and pushing yourself to be better. Elder Serenthal leaned forward. You voluntarily subject yourselves to additional physical danger beyond what your planet already provides? When you put it that way, it sounds weird, Jake admitted. But yeah, I guess we do. Dr. Quintess turned to address the entire hall. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, what we're witnessing defies every model of rational behavior. This species not only survives constant mortal peril, but actively seeks out additional challenges for personal growth and entertainment. She looked back at the three humans with something approaching awe. You're not just adapted to a death world. You've turned the concept of danger itself into a tool for building character, community, and civilization. Elder Serenthal stood to his full impressive height. Students, I believe we are in the presence of the most remarkable species in the known galaxy. They have taken the worst possible planetary conditions and used them to become the best possible version of themselves. The hall erupted in applause that sounded like music from dozens of different worlds. 3 weeks later, Jake stood backstage in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Academic Institute, looking out at the largest crowd he had ever seen. The massive amphitheater was completely packed with beings from across the galaxy. Students, professors, researchers, and even government officials from various worlds had come to hear what was being called the Deathworld presentation. Katie adjusted the microphone clipped to her shirt and took a deep breath. I can't believe this many. People want to hear about Earth. Carlos was reviewing his notes one last time. Professor Vexithera said there are representatives from 47 different worlds out there. Some of them traveled for weeks just to be here. Through the curtain, Jake could see the front rows filled with the alien students who had started this whole thing. Crystaleth was there, her crystal body reflecting the stage lights in rainbow patterns. Wispel floated nearby, his gaseous form more stable than Jake had ever seen it. Bloom-Ara had positioned herself where her leaves could catch the best light. Elder Serenthal walked up to them, his stone-like face showing what Jake had learned to recognize as a smile. Are you three ready to address the assembly? As ready as we'll ever be, Jake said. Remember, Elder Serenthal said, you're not just representing your species today. You're showing the galaxy what's possible when life refuses to give up. The lights dimmed in the amphitheater, and Elder Sarenthal walked onto the stage. His voice carried easily through the vast space without amplification. Distinguished colleagues, students, and guests, today we gather to hear from three remarkable individuals. Jake Morrison, Katie Bell, and Carlos Martinez are the first humans to study at our institute, and through them, we have discovered something that changes our understanding of life itself. He gestured toward the backstage area. These students come from a world that should have killed them. Instead, it made them stronger. Please welcome our human guests. The applause was overwhelming as Jake, Katie, and Carlos walked onto the stage. The sound came from hundreds of different species, creating a symphony of claps, chimes, rustles, and other sounds Jake couldn't identify. They had spent hours preparing their presentation with Professor Vexithara's help. The stage behind them lit up with a massive holographic display showing Earth from space. Jake stepped up to the podium first. 3 months ago, we came here thinking we were just regular students from a regular planet. We had no idea that our home was considered impossible. The Earth image rotated slowly, showing the swirling clouds of weather systems and the varied landscapes below. But we've learned something important from talking with all of you. Earth might be a dangerous place, but it's also beautiful. And the challenges it gave us made us who we are. Katie moved to the center of the stage as the display changed to show human cities. You've heard us talk about disasters and dangers, but we want to show you something else. We want to show you how humans respond to those challenges. The display filled with images of humans helping each other, rescue workers pulling people from collapsed buildings, volunteers distributing food after floods, neighbors helping neighbors rebuild after storms. When bad things happen on Earth, people don't run away, Katie said. They run toward the danger to help each other. Carlos joined her as the images changed to show human achievements. Every building you see was designed to survive earthquakes or hurricanes. Every hospital was built to treat disaster victims. Every emergency system exists because we refuse to let our planet defeat us. The display showed the International Space Station orbiting Earth. We even left our planet and went to space. But we didn't leave because we wanted to escape Earth. We left because Earth taught us that nothing is impossible if you work together. Jake returned to the podium as images of human art, music, and literature filled the screen. Our planet tried to teach us that life is short and fragile. So we learned to create beautiful things. We write stories about hope. We make music about overcoming challenges. We paint pictures of the world we love, even when it's trying to kill us. The display changed to show children playing in parks, families having picnics, people enjoying festivals and celebrations. Most importantly, Jake said, we learned how to find joy in the middle of all that danger. We don't just survive on Earth, we live there, we laugh there, we love there. Katie stepped forward again. Professor Vexthara asked us once how we stay positive when we know our planet could kill us at any moment. The answer is simple. We stay positive because we know our planet could kill us at any moment. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. When you know that everything can change in an instant, you learn to appreciate what you have, Carlos said. You learn to tell people you love them. You learn to help your neighbors. You learn that every day is a gift. The holographic display now showed a montage of human achievements throughout history. Art, science, exploration, literature, music, and technology, all created by people living on a world that constantly threatened them. Jake looked out at the vast audience of alien beings. We know you call us the Deathworld species. Maybe that's true. But we prefer to think of ourselves as the species that learned to live fully because we understand death. He paused, letting that sink in. Everything we've built, everything we've discovered, everything we've become, comes from facing our mortality and choosing to create something beautiful anyway. Katie nodded. Earth didn't make us survivors. It made us dreamers who refused to stop dreaming. Carlos smiled at the audience. It made us fighters who fight for each other, instead of against each other. Jake concluded their presentation. And most of all, it made us grateful. Grateful for every sunrise we get to see, every friend we get to hug, every chance we get to make tomorrow a little better than today. The holographic display faded to show Earth one more time, but now it looked different. Instead of a chaotic, dangerous world, it looked like what it was, home to billions of people who had learned to find hope in the darkest places. Elder Sarenthal returned to the stage as the three humans stepped back. Students and colleagues, I believe we have just witnessed something historic. We have learned that the worst conditions in the galaxy produce the best qualities we can imagine. He turned to address Jake, Katie, and Carlos directly. You have shown us that strength comes not from easy circumstances, but from facing impossible ones with courage and compassion. The elder looked back at the audience. From this day forward, the Galactic Academic Institute will offer a new course of study: Resilience Engineering and the Human Model of Adaptive Civilization. The applause started slowly, then built into a crescendo that seemed to shake the building itself. Beings who had traveled from across the galaxy were on their feet, showing respect for three young humans who had accidentally taught them the most important lesson of their lives. As they walked off the stage, Jake heard Crystaleth's musical voice calling out above the applause, "Thank you for showing us what's possible." Outside the amphitheater, dozens of alien students and professors crowded around them, asking questions and expressing admiration. Professor Vexithara pushed through the crowd with tears of joy shimmering in her golden eyes. "You three have changed how the galaxy thinks about life itself," she said. "You should be very proud." Jake looked at his friends, then back at the crowd of beings who no longer saw them as terrifying survivors of an impossible world, but as inspiring examples of what life could achieve. "We're just happy we could share our story," he said. As they walked across the campus afterward, Katie checked her messages and laughed. "My mom sent a video. There's a tornado warning back home." Carlos shrugged. "Should we send some care packages?" "Already ordered them," Jake said with a grin. Behind them, their new alien friends watched with amazement as the three humans casually planned disaster relief for their family and friends, treating planetary-scale threats as just another Tuesday. And somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of applause still echoing from the Grand Assembly Hall.